Hello guys, so here we are in Logic and we're looking as part of the recent Logic update to 0.4 with some of the EQs that have been added. We are looking at the Pultec Vintage Tube EQ that's been added and just doing a little comparison with some of the other variations of this EQ type out there and available, the ones that I've got available to me anyway. Those of you who know this channel, you know that I'm a big fan of the Pultec. I use this UAD one a lot. I use it for the lift on the top end and it just sounds incredible. So I was very excited to get one in Logic natively for free, basically. I mean, it's a free update for Logic 10, so very excited, and I thought I'd test it out against the ones I already have and already use. So just to explain real quickly what's on the screen, the EQ that we've zoomed into here, that is the new one that has come with Logic. It's got the most basic GUI, however it is completely scalable, which is a nice bonus. And at the end of the day, it's free, it's built into Logic, and it's scalable, so I'm not expecting anything amazing in terms of GUI. I'm after sound. The three units we've now got here are the UAD ones, okay? So we've got the low cut, high cut filter module, which has also got an emulated amp. Now, none of the other versions we're looking at today have that. So I've introduced it top of the chain and we'll just disable it and enable it and see if it really makes a difference. From personal experience, unless you're engaging the filter, it doesn't really make a difference. The middle section is the P1A. Now that's going to be comparable to the top section of the Logic EQ. And in some of the other cases, we've got that as well. And then below it is the MQ5, or an emulation of the MQ5 anyway, which was a second module that went after this initial Pultec part. Now, in most cases, it was routed through the EQP and then into the 5. What with it being hardware, you could patch bay it and do it as you like, but the Logic one appears to be routed that way. The Waves and UAD ones we have here, I can organize the different modules, so I've just done that for symmetry purposes in terms of routing. The ones we're looking at here are the Waves Pultec from the JJP collection. Similar to what's going on with the UAD, we've got the PEQ and then the 5 without the low cut and high cut module. And lastly here we've got the IK Multimedia, and they've just got an emulation of the PEQ. They don't have the MEQ5 module. So in terms of what we've got going on the channels here, they're all labeled through Logic, UAD and Waves, as we can see. Logic one's right at the top. That's the one that's soloed at the minute. Now you might see on my signal chain, I've got a gain plugin before it. That's just there for this purpose that we can see here. And that is, I've got a phase invert on the left and right channels. What that means is the left and right are exactly the opposite of all of the other channels, which means if I were to disable all of the EQs and I were to try and play the UAD and the Logic version at the same time, we'll get this. That's complete silence because it's exactly the same piece of audio, so it's proof that it's completely identical and they cancel each other out. If we were then to make any changes, we would hear those changes. So it's what's called a Null Test. The track actually sounds like this. It's just a beat, and I've chosen it because we've got a bit of headroom. There's some nice dynamics. There's some really good space in there, and it also could benefit from a bit of EQing. And we just want to hear what we can do. Now, me listening to this, I would reach for the UAD and I'd probably push the tops up a bit. What I've actually done is just enabled a few different parts of the EQ. So if we look at the Logic one here, I've got some high attenuation happening at 5K. I've got some high boost happening at 5K. That's one of the key features about a Pultec EQ. It will boost with one type of Q and cut with another, and you can cut and boost in the same areas. So I've done that just to initialize that and get that feel to it. That is with a bandwidth here of 3. Now you can see on the Logic EQ, when I highlight a part, it gives me the exact readout. That's not the case for all the others here. Then looking at low frequency, we've got that set to 100, and that should be set to 100 in all of the others as well. We've got a low boost of about 1 decibel. On the 5 module, we're going to go from left to right. We've got it right down to the 200 hertz range. the Logic one displays this as 0.200 kilohertz, 200 hertz. And we're peaking that at 4 decibels at 700. We're then dipping at 2 decibels. And then for the high, we've just set it to 1.5K and there's not engaged there. And that should be mimicked across all of the other modules here. You'll notice some of the other modules have got gain, they've got switches to turn things on and off. The Waves version, for example, also has the 2 different power supplies with the 60 and 50 hertz. I've not got any of those engaged because they're not available in Logic. If you have a look in Logic's output modules, we do have some different versions. However, the punchy is a graphic EQ from API, and the smooth console EQ looks to be emulating a Neve channel strip. So the silky tube is the output that we want in this case. One plus for the Logic Pultec EQ is we can switch the phase, and we can put it into linear phase if we like, which is a useful feature to have and is not available on any of the others. Let's just have a quick listen. I'm going to play a little bit of that beat, engage the EQ so you can hear the difference, and then we'll look at doing the comparison. So that's all it's doing, lifting some little bits up there with some purposely introduced cuts, and mainly so I can engage all of the band of the EQ. So if we engage the 3 UAD strips now, it's going to be these 3 here. And what we're going to hear now is the phase cancelled version of the 2 summed together. So remember before we played that and we got silence, this time we're going to hear the difference. Cool, so considering they're matching as much as possible here, there is a lot of difference going on. And one thing to notice is the levels straight away. So you notice the Logic EQ is a little bit hotter. So what I've been doing is just taking that down by around 1 decibel. Just to make that a little bit more of a close match. Any kind of dynamic change counts as a change overall, so we'll hear that change. So that's much closer there. We've taken that back just by that 1 decibel. However, there's still a huge difference, and we're going to tweak the UAD EQ slightly, and we're going to disable the top module because it's not part of what is given to us in Logic. So we'll disable that. And just for clarity, I'm going to disable the whole lot just so we can hear what a difference is actually occurring here. Honestly then, no matter what changes we're making, it's not getting any closer to phase cancelling. So there is a huge difference between this and the UAD. Now, to be fair, I'm comparing the UAD version here to something that was introduced free in Logic, and I love this UAD Pultec. That's, it costs about half the price of Logic plus whatever hardware you're using. So I expect it to be above and beyond. But it's a pretty drastic difference here. Now, you'll see that I've put a gain above the UAD as well. If I introduce all of these again, and we just compare it directly to the wave setup here, you'll hear straight away that there's a much greater similarity between the UAD and the waves. Bear in mind, they would have all been created from different versions of the Pultec, so they're never always going to sound exactly the same. But like the difference there is just paramount. So I just want to do this so you can get an idea of what I would really be expecting to hear. So that right there is the UAD and the Waves Pultecs together. And that is much closer to what I would expect. So we've lost pretty much all of the low end, and the real difference is just in that top end shine, which, like I've said, is exactly what I use the UAD version for. If we tweak it a little bit, we get obvious differences straight away. And we can get it a little bit closer by taking the UAD down a little bit, and I think introducing a little bit more attenuation. Look, it's very, very subtle, but they're a hell of a lot closer than the Logic version. So just to carry on the comparison, we're now going to disable the UADs, and we're going to go back to comparing the Logic one with the Waves version now. So we're back to inverting the Logic version, and we're going to be listening to the Waves version back as well. So when we compare the Logic EQ and the Waves EQ, we get a lot of cancellation. A lot of the low end does dissipate away, and we just get left with the real differences in the high end here. Very similar to what was going on with the UAD, and to a greater extent what was occurring between the UAD and the Waves version itself. So lastly, we've got the IK multimedia, and we've only got the top section here. So we've only got the EQP, the 1A, I think is what we call it, Pultec 1A. And to try and get some similarity with that, I'm just going to turn the EQ5 sections all back down to 0, so they're not changing anything. So with the Waves, there's a lot of cancellation going on. There's a huge reduction in overall level. However, again, we can hear most of the spectrum still audible. So there's a lot of differences going on within the plugin here. Next, let's have a look at the IK multimedia. And for that, I'm just going to disable the MEQ5 section on the vintage Tube EQ by just making the peak and dip back to 0 dB, so they're flat, just because it's not part of what the IK multimedia version can emulate. And we'll just have a listen to what's going on between those. Cool, so here notice we've got almost the full spectrum of the sound, but at a lower level. So if we adjust the volume, and bear in mind this time the Logic one's coming out the lowest, so we can give it its 1 decibel back. We're getting a lot of phase cancellation in terms of level. It's very similar, but there's just some differences occurring, which causes a massive drop in level. Just for the perspective of how much is being cancelled, if I take the IK multimedia one away, we're going to get a huge up in volume here. So they're dead close to cancelling, really, because we're losing so much of the sound. However, we've not got any complete cancellation at any point. Like against the Waves, we do lose pretty much all of the low end. We'll have to reduce you back down by around 1 dB. And it's fair to know that all the different volume changes we're having to make between the different plugins, firstly, that is going to affect your mix. You're going to be adjusting levels just by having these plugins in line, and they're going to adjust by different amounts. But moreover, that also makes sense. So depending on which power supply and which model of the exact EQ they emulated, a decibel here and there difference is pretty negligible, especially between hardware. So to see that's not a massive issue. But the fact that we can't really phase cancel any of them just tells you that there's a huge wide variety. Unfortunately, I'm not feeling the Logic Vintage Tube. It's just not doing the magic top end effect, sadly. As we've just shown here, all 4 of these EQs, technically about 6 or 7 of these EQs, they all sound different. They all have their own characteristic. Thus, they can all have their own uses. And if I was to use each one on a different track, it's like using a different version of the Pultec each time. I hope that was helpful for you. Hope it gives you an idea of what is available in terms of the vintage EQ. And I'll see you on the next video. Thanks.